Worship. We throw that word around a lot, but what does it really even mean? My name is Jacob Hubbard, and this is Incarnate Ministries, brought to you by St. Thomas Aquinas in Pilot Point, Texas. So today marks the beginning of our new little mini-series on the liturgy. And I've missed you guys, and I hope you guys have been having a joyful Easter season so far and have been able to participate in person in some beautiful Easter liturgies. And so hopefully these videos will kind of help to unpack the liturgy in a new way and help you to be able to go to Mass and receive more richly from the fruits that are already there, just waiting for us to receive them, right? So this series in particular is going to be looking at Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI's amazing work, The Spirit of the Liturgy, and we're going to kind of be breaking down different topics from that. I'm basing a lot of these talks on that book, so if you like them, then definitely read the book. And then after we finish up kind of our series on that book, we're going to look at the Mass in general, and I'm going to walk through each part of the Mass in particular and help to continue to unpack the theological meaning and significance behind what we do. Because pretty much everything in the Mass is symbolic, and there's a deeper reality that needs to be uncovered for us to really participate in the Mass. And so today's topic in this first video is going to be on the concept of worship. And I said at the beginning, what does worship even mean? And I think that if we look again at the Bible, then we can get a really good insight into what worship is. So in order to unpack what worship is, let's look first at the creation account. And we talked before about how the last in action is the first in intention. Whatever the last thing we do is what we intended to do first all along, right? And so again, we've talked about the significance of the fact that the last day is the day that God rests. But moreover, what's his last act in the book of Exodus? In his people's journey toward making a covenant with him. What's his last act in that? It's giving them the law. It's the theophany of the law. And in that law, we see the commandment, you shall keep the Sabbath. And so we begin to understand that the Sabbath really isn't just about resting, but it's representative, it's symbolic of us in a covenant with God. We shall keep our covenant relationship with God. And so the Sabbath really becomes a larger symbol of covenant with God, where we begin to understand that we need to live a lifestyle of devotion to God, and in doing so, we are set free. And it's understanding that our life is a free gift, created freely by a good God, and then we freely give of ourselves back to him out of love. And in that we find our ultimate purpose and happiness. And this is the essence of worship. It's our gift of God that comes only from understanding that we ourselves are a gift from him. So it's our giving of ourselves back to the Lord, who has given himself first for us. Now, the essence or the heart of this covenant relationship between us and God is liturgy. And we find that in the book of Leviticus, which kind of works out all of the laws of Exodus in a liturgical format and interprets them, and in doing so brings them to fulfillment. And so we can understand then that liturgy is so central because it expresses our covenant relationship with God, and it declares all the world as good and redeemed. And in the liturgy we see God give of himself fully for our sake through the world and redeem the entirety of the world through that, and call us back to himself and allow us to participate in his redemptive act of the world through our own action, not just in the liturgy, but also outside of the liturgy. And this is why St. Irenaeus says that the glory of God is man fully alive. He doesn't just mean liturgically alive in the Mass and in the liturgy, but that liturgical nature allows him to be alive always and living his life as a liturgy for God, his life as a covenant relationship with God, his life as true worship of God. So now that we see that liturgy is at the heart of worship, which is at the heart of the covenant, we can come to understand the importance of liturgy for the Old Testament and the importance of it for us even today. And so in the liturgy, especially in the Old Testament, we see a lot of sacrifice, right? The priests, the high priest, they often offered lambs and things like burnt offerings for the Lord. And it was very clear that sacrifice meant a lot to them. And we can see even in a broader perspective, the pagans, they would sacrifice to their gods. Basically, it was a sacrifice in a negative sense, right? They would give something that they liked, and in return, they would try to manipulate the gods and hope that they would give them their favor because they'd sacrifice something that they liked in this kind of negative sense of giving up, right? And I think that a lot of us can look at sacrifice and see it in that same way, that we're actually surrendering something that we love. We're surrendering freedom. We're kind of turning ourselves in for God and then hoping that God will redeem us. It's this kind of exchange. But to view liturgy and to view sacrifice as that is to view it incorrectly, because it's not about that exchange in a sense that quid pro quo, right? It's not in like, I give something and then God gives something back. No, it's we understand that we ourselves are a gift from God, that everything in the world is a gift from God, and that we have the free choice to do with ourselves what we will, but we want to submit ourselves back to God, because in that we find true meaning and happiness, right? So we see that sacrifice, it isn't about a negative kind of angry, begrumbled, turning in our freedom, but instead it's an expression of our freedom, right? It comes from an understanding that we ourselves are a gift, that the world is a gift, and then submitting ourselves to God. Even in the Old Testament sacrifices, it was understood that God was the one that provided the lamb. And we see this even in the narrative of Abraham with Isaac, right? When Isaac asks his father, "Where is the sacrifice for the altar?" Abraham simply replies, "The Lord will provide." And that actually became so prophetic, because that is exactly how the Israelites began to interpret anything that they were sacrificing. When they sacrificed the lamb, they understood that the lamb was provided for by God, and that the expiation for sin that the lamb was symbolizing was provided for again by God. And in sacrificing the lamb, they looked forward to the Messiah, who eventually would be sacrificed for the sake of them all and would redeem everything. And so they understand that symbolically, when they were sacrificing the lamb, it wasn't them giving God what they had. It was them returning to God what God had given them to give to him, right? I know that's kind of confusing language, but that's how they viewed it, right? It was all free. So to understand liturgical sacrifices in the Old Testament is to understand the heart of liturgy and worship. And that is, it is a response. God initiates. We look even in the Mass. We're never the ones who initiate, right? In the Mass, we always respond to the priest, to the liturgy, to someone else, to the people who are representing God to us, to the priest who is acting in persona Christi, right? We are always responding. God didn't need to create us, but he wanted a body. He wanted a response. And so when we see reality as a free gift, when we see salvation being offered to us as a free gift, and we come to understand that our role is simply response, it sets us free. And it allows us in our minds to respond by participating in the physical liturgy and understanding that God is coming here in the altar and sacrificing himself so that we can be brought up into his redemptive act, right? And so we can intellectually participate in that, in our prayers, and especially in the liturgy. And then we physically participate in that, again, in our liturgy. This is why in the liturgy we work in the physical realm. We engage the senses, and we physically do things like stand, sit, kneel, speak. It's because in doing that we're actually expressing the interior reception even more, right? Like we're expressing our response in a bodily and an incarnational way, right? And then that is supposed to teach us how to live entirely, not just in the liturgy, but always, to always see the world as a free gift from God, and to always be responding to that free gift out of love, and to let that love become bodily in expression, so that we're doing acts of love, and so that by being fully alive, by giving acts of charity and things like that, that in itself becomes a symbol of God's love for the world in the most powerful way, in a truly incarnational way, in the way that God always intended with the liturgy and with worship. God made us. He knows that we're body and soul. And so doesn't it make sense that he gives us a liturgy that incorporates both? Doesn't it make sense that the act of worship, which is itself a response to God's free gift, incorporates both the mind and the body and kind of dissolves that distinction into one beautiful act of the liturgy? And so that's what the liturgy is all about. It's about incorporating our minds and our bodies into the response of giving of ourselves freely to God, surrendering ourselves to God, of allowing ourselves to be united to his paschal mystery, which reaches down to us and then brings us back to God. And this reaching down and returning, it has a term. It's called exitus and reditus. And that's going to be the topic of our next video. So we'll see you guys then. Until then, have a wonderful week. Thank you guys, and God bless.